Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. The Falcons were back on the practice field for their second 4-day block of training camp, but this was the first time that the pads came on. And so I'm here with Tori McElhaney and Terrin Waack, who is back from her wedding. Not her wedding. Her wedding trip is kind of what I meant there.
The fear in my eyes.
We all go, not her wedding.
It's funny because as I was saying that, I was like, don't say her wedding, don't say her wedding, don't say her wedding. And then I said her wedding. So
her cousin's wedding.
If I took only a weekend off from my own wedding, we would have other issues.
Right. Yeah. There's a bigger story there if that happens.
Terrin, do you have any stories from this weekend's wedding?
Yes, it wasn't me who walked down the aisle.
That would have been a great story, though, if you had come back with that.
Plot twist of the century. But no, what was a really small world was at the reception, somebody came, I really wish I remembered his name, but somebody came up to me and said like, oh my gosh, are you Terrin Waack from the Falcons? And I was like, I'm in Watertown, Wisconsin. Yes, but how? Like what? Yeah. But he like follows along because he was a Minnesota Vikings fan, and so now obviously Kirk Cousins is here, so he's been following along with Kirk's journey that has continued. But he watched, read, and scrolled through the gallery for the Bijan Robinson project.
Nice.
Bijan Robinson, The Power of Example. Go check it out now at AtlantaFalcons.com. And it was just like high praise, and it meant a lot. I did find out, smaller world, that he is the groom's grandpa, and the father of the groom is a coworker here. He's part of the BFOB family.
Wow.
Look at that.
Shout out to John.
Hey.
He handles ticketing.
Yeah, small world.
So, yeah, but still, somebody who's not even a Falcons fan gave love to the Bijan Robinson project, which just means everyone out there listening to this right now needs to go to it.
That's exactly what that means. Yeah, of course.
Read between the lines.
That's such an awesome feeling.
It meant a lot.
Though when somebody reads, because it's at times such a one-way medium. Like even right now, we're sitting here just recording this podcast and like we don't have access to everybody who is watching it or the feelings and the feedback and things like that. So when you get somebody who does take the time to kind of say, hey, look, like I thought it was great work. I appreciate the effort that you put in, because I know firsthand like the amount of effort that you put into that piece. So I'm really glad to hear you say that somebody kind of sought you out and thought you did a great job on that.
Yeah, it was wild. I was like, Dad, I got recognized. Look at him, cool.
I mean,
I'm sure he's like, yeah, okay.
You're getting recognized over the weekend. Tori was getting shout outs at the practice on Saturday. Yeah. One of these days I'll actually do something good enough to
come on.
to get some praise.
This podcast is all will. That is for sure.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Boom.
I love that. Yeah.
Y'all missed me.
Let's get into football.
The padded practice.
Lead us off then, Tori. So the Falcons were back out in pads for the first time this training camp. What stood out to you?
The physicality. There was some snippy moments, which a little bit. Yeah. I love. I love it. It's so good. It's exactly what you want. Like you want energy running high. You want there to be intensity, especially going back to the very first thing that we kind of talked about on the first day of practice. The Falcons have to manufacture their own intensity, and that is something that we saw today. There was a lot of really exciting play where you got to see a bit more of these run fits and Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and this offensive line working a little bit more because they have the pads on. So what you're seeing in the trenches and what the defense is able to do is it goes from, 30% to 60% because they are actually able to do the job that they have to do, which is tackling. Granted, they're not bringing anybody to the ground, but still, right. And I also think, too, that it was really interesting that this was the first day, thank God, first day we got one-on-ones.
Yes.
And that was something, if you have been listening to this podcast every day that we've been doing it, you know how I feel about one-on-ones, 7-on-7s, how much I love them, how much I've missed them, how much I've been clamoring for them. And
why do you love them so much? Like, is it just the ability to really hone in on one person versus one person and see those details in work? Is it kind of the added pressure of it all and seeing who can kind of step up in the moment? What is it about the one-on-one experience?
I really like being able to see someone's skill set in action. And I think sometimes when you're in these one-on-one situations and your attention isn't on different things and you truly can, like what you're saying,
it's spotlighted.
focus in on this singular DB versus this singular receiver or tight end or running back or linebacker, whoever, you see footwork, you see the route concept, you see how the ball is, how they're tracking the ball through the air. Like, there are just these little details that you finally get to see, and you really can look at it and be able to kind of compartmentalize it in your head. And I don't know, I think the energy in those things are really fun too. And seeing kind of the guys on the sidelines hyping up the guy who has that spotlight on them, I think is pretty special. It's the time where you really feel that like team energy, but also it's funny because then there still is this like level of like, I'm like good versus good. I'm going up against you and you're my teammate, but like, I'm gonna show you what it is. Like, so I don't know. That's just how I've always loved it. Like, even, you know, when I was little and watching this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the receivers and DBs aspect of it is really fun. They had a great red zone, kind of end zone period today that really illustrated, I think, the talent level and more specifically kind of like the agility, the footwork, some of that stuff that they've added at the wide receiver position. But it was also such a great showcase for Kirk Cousins today, and kind of the touch and stuff that he was putting on the ball. But Terrin, we spoke with Jay Rogers after practice, who is
he is so excited.
He really is. He's the defensive line coach for the Falcons. And what did he kind of tell us in terms of what the kind of the linemen are thinking about with the pads coming on?
Right. I just remember during the off-season program, he was like, we're playing in our underwear. Like, you can't, like, the defense isn't
that makes me
doing
so
anything
uncomfortable. Like someone else does that all the time. They're just running around in their underwear, and I'm like, that's weird.
It's a visceral image that just kind of it puts in your head. Yeah.
That phrasing and pajamas. I don't know what you prefer.
I would rather do pajamas.
As long as they're like animal.
All right, is it pajamas or pajamas?
It's
I think the public wants to know once and for all.
PJs.
Pajamas is very Midwestern of you, I feel like.
I did just come back from the great state.
Yeah. I'm reading a book to my son called Llama Llama Red Pajama, which makes me think that it's pajama
red
because
pajama.
of, you
Did
know,
I say pajama?
obviously.
You said pajama.
Pajama.
Yeah, pajama.
So anyway, we've got underwear and pajamas that have been taken off now. What do they have on instead?
God.
Pads? All the pads? Cool.
Full uniform?
Full uniform, full
pads. Oh my gosh. But that is like the main responsibility of the defense is to get physical. I mean, but not only them, because yes, we're talking about Jay Rogers. He's saying like, this is our time to shine. This is day one of practice, honestly, for the defense, especially the defensive line. Like everything they've been doing before, warm up. This is practice number one. But it's on the flip side of the ball too, because we also talked to Jake Matthews, and he's over here like, I woke up with an extra pep in my step, and this is his 11th training camp, and he's like, pads day one, woo, let's go. Like a little excitement there. And that's because both of them need to put their hands on people.
Right.
Like at that line of scrimmage, they call it in the trenches for a reason. They need to get physical. And so this is like their opportunity to finally do it. I know that it was only the first day of it, and it still is a ramp-up period. They're not going 100% or 110, which I've realized you say a lot, 110.
I do say it.
You got to go above and beyond.
Well, it's just like, I think like 100%, like you can go 100%, but there's always a little extra 10% that you
That's a real coach's daughter mentality.
There's always some other 10% that you can tap into.
Anyways.
I like that.
Thank you.
It stresses me out that there's an extra 10 out there.
Well, honestly, like even people listening to this podcast, there's always a 10% that you can tap into to be better.
Yeah. I just noticed when I was listening to the podcast on the way to work today to catch up on things that I missed.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the trenches, the battle's getting real. It's going to get more aggressive. I'm really curious how it's going to be.
Joint practices?
Joint practices more so than preseason games.
Yeah.
I know you despise preseason games.
But I love joint
practices because you have.
Yeah.
I think that's even more of an indication of where a team is than the preseason game.
100% agree.
Because everyone's involved.
If we did more joint practices and less preseason games, you would never hear a complaint out of me.
I kind of think coaches feel the same way a little bit,
maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, about how like shortening the preseason, things like you're in favor of that because it just feels a little bit like it's become different than maybe it was 5, 10, certainly 15 years ago. Like the philosophy behind that, it's everything's just changed. And so when it changes, I think you do reevaluate what's working, what's not working. And when you do have teams that are kind of like, we're not really playing any starters this preseason.
Yeah.
That's why I think the excitement maybe shifts in favor of these joint practices where you know that you're going to get Drake London out there against Miami's best corner. You know that you're going to get Tyreek Hill working against A.J. Terrell or Jalen Waddle going against like Mike Hughes or Jesse Bates, right? Like, so that stuff is certainly going to be really exciting. But to bring it back to kind of like the trench play, it reminds me of what Chris Lindstrom said on day one, right? And in kind of getting back to that physicality, he's really focusing in on the small details of like his hand placement and making sure that that's accurate. That's kind of all the offensive and defensive line I feel like have to work with until the pads come on, are those like small little details. It's almost like a wide receiver catching from the jugs machine. That's not a really fair indication of what life is going to be like on a Sunday when you've got a player draped over your back trying to knock the ball down from in front of you. Like, this is just a whole other level. And I really kind of thought that both sides had some good moments, but I was especially impressed with Atlanta's, I think, run game. I don't know why I should have, like, I wasn't necessarily surprised by that because we know how good their run offense can be, but there were holes for Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson, and Carlos Washington. Tori, what did you see from the trench play?
Yeah, I was really pleased with what I saw, to be completely honest, especially from this starting offensive line. It was, we've talked so much. We talked to Dwayne Ledford, who's the Falcons offensive line coach, about how much continuity there is. And the fact that you return 5 starters, that's almost unheard of. Almost at any level, that's unheard of. And the fact that the Falcons are able to do that for a group that was so productive last year in the run game especially, I think that only bodes well for them. And I'll say this, like, there were a few times where you understand and you can see, not even going 60%, why Chris Lindstrom gets paid the money that he's being paid, why he is constantly considered one of the best guards in the league, bar none. And you saw that today. And granted, there are certain times where the twos were going against the ones were going against the twos, but regardless, like, Chris Lindstrom is kind of this linchpin for this run game in a way that I mean, if you run the ball down the right side, I just feel like you're going to pick up 3 or 4 yards every single time just because of what Chris Lindstrom was able to do. I know there was this one play where it was Chris, Caleb McGarry, and Kyle Pitts, and the hole that they were able to create for Tyler Algier was notable. And I know that we've had this big conversation about Kyle Pitts as this like full, big picture, well-rounded tight end. And you have to talk about Kyle Pitts, the blocker, in that regard too. And seeing that from him in a moment that it's the middle of practice, who cares? But seeing the hole that he was able to provide and the block he was able to put on his guy to help out Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom as they're already doing what they need to do, as I'm like ramming my head into the microphone, like that matters in this run game. You cannot overlook all of that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up Kyle Pitts because that's kind of where I was going to go next is I've noticed from him, and you've heard kind of a couple of players and coaches make comments of it, like, I do think his blocking is far and away improved from where he was in year one. And I know everybody's itching for him to kind of get back into that receiver first role that a lot of people envisioned when he was drafted. But I do think we would be wrong to discount maybe the like work that Kyle Pitts has had to put in over these last couple of years in the offense that they found themselves in. And long term in his career, like, these 2 years are a crash course in blocking at the NFL level. And so now as he is maybe able to pull out and focus a little bit more on, you know, what he is maybe naturally more attuned to, which is that receiving aspect, he's going to be able to rely upon the foundation that he developed over these last couple of years. And he had a washdown block just where he kind of moved everybody to the left and created a nice outside lane for Bijan Robinson later in the 11-on-11 session. So again, like, I kind of think this has been an awesome camp for Kyle Pitts so far. We hope it continues. But Terrin, you were here for the very first practice, notably, you know, not the most exciting of the 4-day block. And now you came back for the first day of pads. A lot kind of did happen between then. I'm curious, did you have anything that just was like, oh, wow, that's a little, obviously the pads coming on is different, but aside from that, did you have any like, that's different than what I saw the first day? Some things have changed.
Well, it wasn't boring.
No, it was not.
There we go. We'll get that one out of the way right away.
every single day, someone has come up to me and said something about my boring comment. Every single day.
It was a exclamation more than it was a comment.
It has.
She goes, boring.
Yeah, it was. It's hung with me for a week now. So,
but it's just being able to see that last period where it was the ones versus ones. It's kind of like you're seeing your first glimpse of the future almost. Like, okay, now we're here. Now we're talking football. Now it's the best versus the best, even if it was brief. The excitement that erupted among the defense when Jesse Bates picked off Kirk Cousins on that very first play.
Yeah.
Was like, whew.
You wonder if those one-on-one film sessions, if those came back to bite Kirk on that play. That was my first thought. I was like, Kirk, you're giving some state secrets.
Hey, man, thanks so much.
Thanks for your help to pick you off. Yeah. But, I mean, just them having that one-on-one time is also going to be beneficial, I think, to both sides of the ball.
Can we talk about how the rotation has kind of changed a little bit too with this first team? You know who has been very exciting to watch and his kind of maturation, very quick maturation, Bralen Trice. I wrote about this in our Battle Lines story series that we ran our first one this morning before
Tuesday
practice.
Morning.
Yeah, Tuesday morning.
Read that. Asked Raheem about it before practice.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
So what did Raheem say about Bralen?
Yeah,
well, I mean, it was pretty succinct at first because he's like, those who deserve it deserve it. Like, and Bralen has proven that he is capable of working with the ones. And then I even asked like Arnold McElhaney about it, and he's like, he's just really instinctual. It comes so naturally to him. And so I don't know. I can't say I expected it.
Yeah, I'm excited about Bralen Trice. I think that seeing him get those opportunities with the ones, and I think that this is someone who, Will, you may have even said this, like early on when we were talking about like rookies who can make the biggest impact. I think
he's the most ready out of the box.
Right.
Yep.
It's Bralen Trice, and we are actively seeing that come to fruition right now, which is very, I mean, obviously he's still a rookie. He's got things that he needs to work on, things he needs to learn, and, you know, he'll kind of have to learn trial by fire a little bit. But I don't know. The Falcons have been pretty successful in sometimes especially the last 2 years of this like trial by fire type of situation. Yeah. Matthew Bergeron, trial by fire. Bralen Trice, trial by fire.
I think you look at LA last year, Colby Turner.
Yeah.
Right? Trial by fire, right? And he is I think the proof of concept with what you're trying to do here. But yeah, Bralen Trice, not a surprise to kind of see him be maybe one of those first rookies that pop a little bit. And what did Jay Rogers say to us after practice? Like, clearly defining roles for these guys.
Yeah.
And that's why when you looked at Bralen Trice, it was just really easy for me to envision what a role for him looks like in year one, which is kind of why I felt like he may be the first guy to see some time out there.
Especially considering how little was done in that outside linebacker room.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like how little, it's a lot. I mean, yeah, James Smith-Williams, you bring back Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie is on his third year. Mm-hmm. But
like those are kind of the guys.
That's kind of it. Yeah.
Well, this idea of designated roles, that was something even Raheem spoke about, and I kind of appreciate that, where it's like you're all going to have a specific role to run, and you're going to do it to the best of your ability, rather than it be a little bit of wishy-washy.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, and that's kind of what he was saying. It's like on the coaches to define that a little bit, which I like, because again, it feels like the onus is on the coaching staff. Like they kind of knew that that's what they were going to do. Yeah, when you say that word you used, I'm going to keep onus in the back of my mind, and I'm going to recall that really quickly. But it does feel like the coaching staff is making their lives maybe a little bit harder to make the players' lives a little bit simpler, and that should pay dividends on Sunday. Before we get to Camp Champ for today, you were in Arthur Blank's press conference. He came up to view practice today, kind of take a little tour of all of the upgrades that have happened in this building, which are awesome. But what did, if you can briefly kind of like give us the highlights of Arthur's press conference and maybe what stood out to you?
So first things first, found out today that the Atlanta Falcons sold out their season tickets for 2024, which is something that...
It'd be weird if they sold them out for 2025 already.
Right, yeah. But I mean, I think that was...
Christmas.
Right, but that was something that right off the bat, he was like, it's evidence that there is this level of excitement that has picked up, and the fact that there was this like significant renewal rate, which hadn't happened in 2 decades previously.
Was it like 95%?
95%,
That's crazy.
Which, I mean... 95% is 95%. You don't got to say it any other way.
Right.
But he kind of talked about that and the fan base and wanting to put a competitive product out on the field, and how that hasn't necessarily been the case. And he talked about his optimism for the 2024 season and how he has reason to believe that there should be optimism and that the hope should be a playoff berth. And so we're having this conversation about hope, expectations, and kind of seeing the fans be more excited, more involved, more entertained, let's just say.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the conversation. And the other part of the conversation is this is the first time that we've talked to Arthur Blank since the Falcons drafted Michael Penix with the number 8 overall pick in the NFL draft this year.
Here we go again.
And that the thing is like, he said exactly what everybody has been saying since that moment. I literally wrote a story the night of on this, where it's
I shared the same thought. I didn't even work for the team at this point.
Right.
Like
They did not, after going through what they went through the last 2 years in the post-Matt Ryan era of not having a direct succession plan, they were not going to make the same mistake twice.
It's as simple as that. Like,
that is the answer.
Reason.
And they liked Michael Penix Jr. enough to make him the guy.
Yep.
And that is it.
If this had been year 16 of Matt Ryan and they make that selection, I believe that it is not viewed as maybe there's not like this bewilderment about the selection that I think there was when it was immediately made, because I think it's much clearer to everybody that like, all right, Matt Ryan is on the downslope. You got to set up the future somehow. But because it was like the bang bang of going to get Kirk Cousins, which is already a new factor. It's like, here's the future. You're already maybe like capping what that future timeline is. So I understand kind of that, again, initial shock, but it's just that bang bang of it that I think is what is tripping people up.
Here's the thing too, and I'll add to that. I do think if the Falcons were able to get back into the first round and take an edge rusher, you feel completely different about that draft class.
I agree as well. Which they tried to do. Latu, my boy.
Like,
so I wanted.
Literally, you had these edge rushers that were in this block and from like 15 to 32.
And the league told you what, like, that's where they were supposed to go.
And they tried. Terry Fontenot has said multiple times, we called everyone from 9 to 32 to try and get back in, and no one was biting.
Right.
And I think if that happens, if they go out and they get Michael Penix at number 8 overall.
And double dip.
And get an edge rusher, and people can have this like conversation. It's like, that also makes you feel differently about that one night, that one decision.
Well, it's a little bit like, you know, some of my frustration on a game day is this tendency to, I think, be very reactive to the outcome, where part of the way I view my job is like understanding the decision. It's not about viewing the outcome, it's about viewing the decision that led to ultimately whatever that outcome may be. But when I hear that, I'm like, okay, so everybody who thinks that the Falcons just said they were fine at pass rusher and stood pat and didn't do anything and didn't plan to, it's like, well, no, they did plan to add somebody as a first round talent. That's what they tried to do. It just didn't work out. So you don't necessarily hold it against them for it not working out, because the plan was one thing and the outcome was another.
And who's to say that Bralen Trice won't turn into
and that's why I love the Bralen Trice pick, is
Yeah.
because it's like, again, he has still, I think, some upside. It's not maybe as high as those first-round guys, but his floor is also considerable.
And I think that they were really worried that they weren't going to get him. If you go back and you watch like the On the Rise that we did, and we have footage from the War Room, Terry is as nervous as I have seen him.
Or is he
he's very nervous, and he's kind of walking around. And Raw even goes, "Would you relax?" Like that, and that was that moment. He thought
great.
that
I need to go back and watch that.
Yeah, I go back and watch it. It was the On the Rise of our draft weekend that our video team put out, and that moment to me was like, they're very high on Bralen Trice, and we are now seeing why.
I remember a similar type of situation involving the Grady Jarrett pick way back when, where it was kind of like, I believe DQ really, really wanted Grady, had a sight set on Grady, and Thomas was kind of like, hey, I understand how the draft is working, how things are playing out. He's going to be there. Trust me, he's going to be there. He's going to be there. And he was there, right? And
look where we are now.
Exactly. I was going to say, hopefully we got a similar situation to tell in 10 years.
I'm having draft flashbacks with this conversation.
Yeah.
I know.
What else did AMB say?
That's kind of it. He was, I could go into like the approvals process of Raheem and Terry now, but...
All right, those are January flashbacks.
Right, exactly. These are all topics of conversation that we have hit. The main thing was his excitement about the season ahead. the optimism that he feels the fan base has. We talked a little bit about primetime games and how the Falcons went from not having really any hardly the last couple of years, none at all last year, to now there are 4 between Monday, Thursday, and Sunday night games. So there's an excitement level. He says that he feels it within the fan base, and that's kind of where he left it.
Those
awesome.
Primetime post-game pods are going to get weird.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, we're going to have either so much coffee or espressos, whatever. We're going to figure that out. But let's go ahead and move on to Camp Champ. We will wrap up this episode by nominating the player that we felt had the best practice out there today, the first day of pads. As a quick refresher, let me run through the 4 players who have already earned this designation so far in camp. We had Grady Jarrett on day 1 for his return. We had Rondale Moore on day 2. We had Kyle Pitts on day 3 for his performance out at Secondary High School. And then we wrapped it up on day 4 with Jesse Bates's nomination of Troy Anderson, who also had a pick. I'm choosing to believe it was a pick out there at a Secondary High School. So for our first day back, Terrin, we'll start with you. Okay. Who are you nominating as today's Camp Champ?
I'm torn between 2. Can I say them both?
I was too. I was torn between 2. So maybe say both of them.
Okay. My first one in gut reaction was Jesse Bates because of the first official non-disputable interception.
I like that.
Well, no, you weren't there at Secondary High School. We did have the very first interception of camp was Clark Phillips.
But it wasn't off of Kirk,
okay.
right?
That one was, I'm saying off of Kirk.
Oh, okay, off of Kirk.
I guess I should have clarified.
Okay, yeah.
I saw in your piece, so that's why I think I knew.
That's
where your head was
why.
at. Yeah.
He got me.
Okay.
But Clark Phillips did get the first official one.
Yeah.
Sorry, Clark. You can have your flowers too.
All right, so JB3.
And Grady Jarrett, because the man took contact today.
Grady Jarrett. You have such a soft spot in your heart for Grady.
We all do.
He's entering year 10 after that injury.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The rehab process and how vulnerable he was talking about it. Yeah, I got a soft spot now. That man went through it.
That man went through it.
He went through it, and I'm here to support him.
Okay, so we got Jesse and Grady.
All right, my 2 were Bralen Trice. I thought that you were able to see him working a little bit more with the ones. I find him to be a very interesting talent that has a high ceiling that we were able to kind of tap into a little bit. My second one, which is I actually think the one that I'm going into, Nate Lamon.
I thought you were going to double down on one of mine.
Nate Lamon, I thought, had a really good day. There were a few times where he kind of blew up a play on his own. And when you kind of see the way that they are using Caden Ellis was up on that defensive line. I know we talked about this the other day at Secondary High School. It's happening even more.
He almost had a pick too, didn't he?
Yeah, he did almost have a pick. And so you see Caden's role evolving, changing, whereas Nate is kind of the guy. He has the green dot. He's the one that's calling the defense. He has honestly a little bit, even though we did see a bit more of Troy Anderson rotating in with the ones today, I think that Nate Lamon has, I don't want to say it, but he's kind of made himself, what's the word? Like
indispensable.
Indispensable.
Yeah.
That to me was evident today. Ooh. And with the pads on, with them going a little bit faster, seeing how he commands the defense and it frees up Caden Ellis to do some different things. And I don't know. Nate Lamon, I think, gets my pick.
I love that. And you and I have kind of talked a little bit previously about how we did feel that Caden's role last year could have been a little bit more multiple, versatile. So if Nate has moved into maybe more of that traditional type of linebacker role, by extension, it could allow you to use some of these different qualities that you have at the inside linebacker position.
That trio is just so good.
It's like going to be maybe my favorite group, I think, to watch this season. I expected you to go with Nate. I'm prepared to also vote for Nate. However, I want to throw out Kirk Cousins, even though he threw the pick today. I thought he just had an awesome kind of goal line period. I touched on that wide receiver DB session, but in a lot of ways, to me, that was like the Kirk Cousins show. He had one pass to Darnell Mooney that like Darnell just beat his guy on kind of like a little fade to the corner. And, you know, the camera, if you're watching us on YouTube, which you always should be, he kind of like just ran past the defender and held his arms out like this. God, I look so silly. And didn't even move his hands or his stride. And the ball just dropped perfectly, so softly in his arms. So the touch that Kirk is able to put on the ball, and he can still drive it on these slants, but he can get it over guys. It was just really, really impressive in such a tight area. So I'm going to throw Kirk Cousins out there. I can't believe he hasn't been a camp champ yet. He's been kind of like, to me, the star of camp, but maybe not one particular day. However, I'm willing to change my vote to Nate Landman because I thought he too had a really, really strong day, and he's an important player in camp and for this team.
Agreed.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Nate Landman, congratulations. Day 5, camp champ for Tuesday, the first day of pads. Only fitting we give it to a hard-hitting linebacker, a thumper in the middle of the defense there. So that will do it for today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle, which is presented by Zaxby's. A reminder, Friday's practice will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You can buy tickets, I believe they're, $5? So go ahead and grab those. Come on down. If you haven't been to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, it's an awesome chance to just see the venue, but it is an excellent chance to come out and see kind of what we've been talking about this whole time. See Raheem's energy, see the play between the receivers and the DBs, and Kirk Cousins getting the ball to play in the trenches. It's really going to be an excellent practice out there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It usually is. So please come on down.
Say hi.
Say hi. Yeah. And while you're at it, go ahead and like and subscribe to our audio and video platforms. Hit the alert button. You'll get notified every time we have a new episode up, just like this one. But yeah, that will do it for us today. For Tori, McElhaney, Terrin, Waack, welcome back from not your wedding, from your cousin's wedding.
Waack
That's
is
important,
back.
everybody. Waack is back.
That's not how you pronounce your last name.
I know,
It's
right?
okay. I'm allowed to do it.
Waack attack. Waack. You can't throw that on me at the last second as we're doing the outro.
Go ahead, do the outro.
Now I'm just thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll be Waack.
Oh, God.
All right, we got to get out of here. I'm Will McFadden. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. Until tomorrow, everybody, take care.